in the quiet corner of a dimly lit studio, where the glow of cameras softened into something warm and personal. Scarlett Spears sat across from Morris Bernard with a posture that balanced vulnerability and resolve. It was one of those rare moments when celebrity felt secondary, when the light seemed less interested in spectacle and more invested in soul-searching. And for Scarlett, who had spent much of her recent years building walls around her deepest emotions, this conversation felt less like an interview and more like a long-awaited exhale. Morris, known not only for his legendary work on General Hospital, but also for his raw, compassionate interviews on mental health, greeted her with that signature calm, part counselor, part friend, part someone who has lived through storms and survived them. Scarlett confessed later that it was his presence alone that gave her the courage to say yes to the interview in the first place. Loneliness, she began softly, as if the word itself might echo in places she preferred silent. It isn't something you expect to catch up with you, not when you're surrounded by people, not when you're constantly doing. But it does. It creeps in through the spaces where you least expect it. For a moment, Morris didn't say a word. He leaned forward, offering silence like a gift, an open space where Scarlett could pour the parts of herself she usually kept guarded. It started during the downtime between shoots, she continued. Everyone else seemed to go off into their real lives, their families, their routines, and I'd go home to stillness. I used to love it. I used to think stillness meant freedom. But after a while, it became this mirror I didn't want to look into. She paused, twisting her fingers gently. The vulnerability in her posture was unfiltered. There were no characters here, no scripts, no rehearsed lines, just the unvarnished truth. Morris nodded. Stillness can be the hardest part, he said. When there's no noise left to distract you, you hear everything you've been trying to outrun. Scarlett's eyes softened with understanding, and perhaps gratitude. Exactly, she said. And the loneliness wasn't just about being physically alone. It was feeling like everyone else had a map to life, and mine was smudged, unreadable. She talked about the pressure of portraying strong characters while privately feeling fragile, those unspoken expectations that come with being in the public eye. People assume if you can deliver emotional monologues on screen, you must have your real-world emotions sorted too. But acting, she said, was sometimes the safest place to feel anything at all. It's strange, she admitted. You'd think that pretending to be someone else would make everything more complicated, but sometimes it's easier to process pain when it isn't yours, when the script hands it to you, when the director calls for it, when it's controlled. Real life doesn't give you that kind of direction. Morris, who has openly shared his own mental health battles for years, understood the sentiment more than most. He guided her gently into deeper territory, not pushing, just opening doors. What was the turning point? He asked. Scarlett exhaled a shaky breath. A day I almost canceled everything. A day I couldn't make myself get out of bed, not because I was tired, but because I was scared. Scared of facing another day that felt like it belonged to everyone else but me. It was the first time she'd said that out loud, she admitted. But then I remembered all those interviews you've done, she told him with a small smile. People talking about their fear, their anxiety, their breaking points, and something clicked. You don't need to collapse to admit you're struggling. You don't need to wait for a dramatic moment to ask for help. Reaching out wasn't easy, she made that clear. The first call she made was to a friend she hadn't spoken to in months. I just said, I don't want to be alone today. And that was the bravest thing I'd done in a long time. Morris smiled knowingly. A lot of people don't realize how brave those words are. From there, Scarlett explained how she started confronting her fears one small step at a time. She began journaling. She took long walks without her phone. She allowed herself to feel without labeling every emotion as a flaw. And then, she added, I finally decided to talk about it publicly. That, she explained, was where the fear hit all over again. It's one thing to tell a friend you're lonely, she said. It's another to tell thousands of people. There's always that voice saying, people want strength, not struggle. But the longer I stayed silent, the more unreachable I felt. I don't want to be unreachable. Morris leaned back, his expression reflective. People connect most with truth, he said, not perfection. Scarlett smiled, her eyes glistening. I'm learning that. She spoke of fans, how they often send messages saying her performances help them feel seen. I've always cherished that, she said. But I realized I wasn't giving them all of me, not the parts that could really help, not the parts that say, you're not the only one feeling this way. Loneliness, she said, has softened her rather than hardened her. It has made her more attentive, more grateful, more present. It's also made me braver, she added. Because fears grow in the dark. When you bring them into the light, even a little, they start to lose their power. Morris looked at her with quiet pride. That's the truth, he said, and you're doing it. The interview ended not with a dramatic conclusion, but with something quieter and far more authentic. Two people who understood each other unspokenly, acknowledging the courage it takes to be honest. Scarlett left the studio not freed from loneliness entirely, because that isn't how healing works, but lighter, as if she had finally set something down. As she walked toward the exit, she said one last thing that lingered long after the cameras stopped recording. Everyone talks about fear as something to defeat, but sometimes fear isn't an enemy. Sometimes it's a compass, and I'm finally learning to follow it to the places I need to grow. In sharing her truth, Scarlett Spears did more than open up. She opened a door for herself and for anyone who has ever sat in silent stillness wondering if they were alone in their battles. And in that moment, under the warm glow of studio lights, fear didn't look quite so frightening after all.